Look, if you're the kind of person who loves discovering the absolute limits of human potential and the real mechanics of persistence, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're looking at an incredible, true story of resilience that literally defies all odds. We're going to map out a journey that goes from the absolute darkest imaginable depths all the way to the highest peak on planet Earth. Okay, let's dive right into this with a question that sits at the very core of human psychology. What actually separates the people who give up from the people who achieve the impossible? I mean, it's so easy to just assume the answer is luck, right? Or resources, or maybe some rare genetic advantage. But as we'll see by retracing Arunima's incredible journey today, the real difference, well, it's an internal framework. It's a choice. Section 1. The Unthinkable Tragedy. So let's look at where this story actually begins, because to truly grasp the height of the summit, we first have to understand the depth of the valley. Arunima Sinha wasn't just your average citizen. She was a national-level volleyball player in India. I really want you to picture the intense everyday dedication that takes. She was in peak physical condition, highly disciplined, and looking at an incredibly promising athletic future. And psychologically, this is absolutely crucial to understand. Her body, her agility, her physical capability, those things were entirely central to her identity and her self-worth. Everything she was building her life around required her to be at the absolute peak of human mobility. But in 2011, that reality was completely shattered in just a fraction of a second. While she was traveling on a train, she was suddenly and viciously attacked by a group of robbers trying to snatch her belongings. Naturally, being a fierce athlete, she resisted. She fought back. And when she did, her attackers did the unthinkable. They pushed her out of the moving train. She tumbled out into the dark, falling directly onto a nearby track, just as another train came speeding past, completely running over her leg. The aftermath was just utterly devastating. To save her life from that catastrophic trauma, the doctors had absolutely no choice but to amputate her leg below the knee. Now, just take a second to process the immense weight of that. The physical pain is unimaginable on its own, but for a national-level athlete, the psychological devastation is profound. Imagine waking up and realizing your physical identity, your career, your lifelong dreams have just been violently ripped away. For most people, and honestly, completely understandably, they'd consider their lives over in that moment. They'd resign themselves to a restricted existence, mourning the self they used to be. Section 2. An Impossible Goal. So, the crucial point is, this is the exact moment where the trajectory of her life drastically shifts. Lying in that hospital bed, facing total uncertainty, the world looked at her and offered sympathy. But she completely refused it. She didn't want pity. She realized she needed a new purpose. While still recovering, dealing with a fresh amputation, she made a decision that shocked absolutely everyone around her. She declared, "I will climb Mount Everest." Not a local hill, not a gradual return to walking, the absolute tallest, most unforgiving peak on Earth. It was a massive psychological leap to go from losing a limb to targeting the literal roof of the world. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the reality check she was up against. Stack these variables together for a second. She now had to learn to navigate the world with a heavy artificial leg. She had very limited financial and logistical resources. She possessed literally zero prior experience in high-altitude mountaineering. Oh, and she'd be voluntarily walking into some of the harshest, deadliest weather conditions on the planet. We're talking about the death zone here, where oxygen is desperately thin and temperatures plunge to negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Naturally, the public and the skeptics thought she was completely delusional. They thought this goal was completely and utterly impossible. But you know what? She completely blocked out the noise. She began to train relentlessly. And guys, this was not some glamorous cinematic training montage. It was an agonizing, gritty reality. Step 1 meant falling repeatedly as she learned to balance her new, changing body under massive physical strain. Step 2 involved suffering deep, painful injuries. Because she was a fresh amputee, her prosthetic leg would actually bleed and constantly chafe against her raw skin during her training climbs. And step 3 was enduring the freezing, harsh weather that pushes even fully able-bodied elite climbers to their absolute breaking point. The physical toll was mind-boggling, but her persistence, unyielding. Section 3. Reaching the Summit. All of that pain, all of the repeated failures and bloody injuries during training lead us directly to the climax of this incredible journey. Notice the impossibly short 2-year gap between the data points you see here. 2011, a tragic, life-altering amputation on a train track. 2013, standing triumphant on the summit of Mount Everest. That is a span of merely 2 years. 2 years to go from the absolute lowest, most physically broken point of her life to standing higher than any other person on the planet. It's almost hard to comprehend that speed of recovery and triumph. And with that summit, she etched her name into history. Arunima officially became the world's first female amputee to ever climb Mount Everest. Just let the magnitude of that historic achievement really sink in for a second. It's a literal monument to the staggering power of human resilience, and it shows us exactly what happens when an unbreakable will meets an immovable mountain. Let's move to section 4, the power of choice, and see how this builds into an incredibly practical framework for our own lives. Let's pivot from her story to yours. We all face a fundamental choice when hardship hits. On one hand, we can choose to view obstacles as excuses, perfectly valid, socially acceptable reasons why we simply cannot do something. Or, on the other hand, we can choose to view those exact same obstacles as the very fuel, the literal reasons we absolutely must achieve something extraordinary. You control your determination. Arunima couldn't control being thrown from that train, but she retained absolute power over her internal mindset. Which brings us to a really fundamental realization. Your circumstances do not determine your future, your response to them does. Listen, everybody faces setbacks. You're going to face failure, you'll face loss, rejection, and profound hardship. That is a guarantee in life. But the defining difference between the people who just plateau and the people who ascend, it's the persistence to choose what happens next. The entire psychology of resilience is built on that active response mechanism. It kind of forces us to rethink what heroism actually is. We often falsely assume that heroes are people who are just gifted with easy lives, or natural talents, or a path totally free of friction. But actually, scratch that, that's simply not true. People don't remember heroes because life was easy for them. They remember them because they actively kept moving forward when life became incredibly, suffocatingly difficult. Moving forward through the hardship, that's the exact metric that makes a real hero. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to carry with you today. What will you choose to do with your next obstacle? Because let's be real, a challenge is coming. When it arrives, are you going to let it become an excuse, or will you use it as your reason to achieve your own summit? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I absolutely look forward to exploring our next topic with you soon.